You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 362, Light of the Jedi, Part 5. We are finally here at the end. I know we got delayed by a couple weeks, but we are finally wrapping up our extensive coverage, no stone unturned coverage of The Light of Jedi, which is the first novel in the High Republic series. And to help me do that is none other than our resident The High Republic expert, Mr. Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show, sir.
I appreciate it, man. Good to be here. I was just thinking here while we were listening to intro music and stuff, and I was like, man, Albert, you are the eye of the Cantina Cast.
Oh, well, thank you. That's I don't know if that's a compliment just yet.
I don't know. Let's see where we take it.
Yeah. We'll get to that here in just a little bit.
Right.
Now we've got a healthy amount of chapters still to cover, 36 to 43. So we're going to jump right into this and get started. We got a couple of quick things that I do want to mention. As you guys know, we've already released our first episode of From a Certain Point of View, which is our celebration bonus show that we're doing. We'll continue to do that throughout the course of this year as we celebrate our 10th anniversary of being on the air. 10 years. Wow. And we've already had one. So JW's episode came out. That was really great. We are set to record another one a little bit later this month with, let's just tell it's Dante. So, and he's with us tonight. Hey, Dante. You may know him as Utini over on Discord. So he'll be our next guest. And we've got at least 5 other people lined up that I've got to work with in terms of scheduling. But that is the show where our visitors come on and get to talk about whatever they want. So we're giving you guys the voice to kind of pick the topics and dissect them up. So should be a good episode. We're looking forward to that as well. And let me see here. I'm going to roll right through this thing here. Let me pop this open. There we go. So this is the, again, like I mentioned, we were celebrating 10 years of being on the air, 10 years of podcasting, 362 episodes as of this recording. And this is the official logo that we've got. So I promise I will get this uploaded tonight. So it'll be available on TeePublic if you're interested in purchasing any of the merchandise. I'm not a real hard sell on this stuff. So if you're interested, please go out and take a look at it. But it looks good, I think. And pretty cool, man. I like the fact that we're still going on. So here's to another 10 years, Jonesy.
Absolutely.
All right. And then the last thing is we're going to take a quick break after this episode. Spring break's coming up. We'll come back and record episode 363, which will be a Q&A episode. So if you've got questions that you'd like to for us to answer over the air, please start submitting those. I postponed the social media stuff a week just because we're still at least 2 weeks out before the show airs. So all that to say is you'll see the promotions and the ways to get your questions over to us. It's all the same stuff. The 800 number or the 888 number if you've got that. The Discord, email, social media, love letter, death threat, however you want to do it, you can get your questions over to us and we'll get them answered on the air for this episode.
And questions can be about anything. High Republic, Mandalorian, Albert's true hair color under that hat. It could really be anything.
There is no hair. That's the funny. No, I'm kidding. Excuse me. Okay, got me in mid-drink there. But yeah, so we're looking forward to that one. Those are always good shows, and you guys challenge the heck out of us with some of those.
Those are a lot of fun. Yeah.
So, all right, without further ado, excuse me, let's get into Part 5. And we're going to start with, before we get into chapter 36, it opens with the interlude, which I thought was really great because we got some insight. You know, we had to wait this long, but that's typically how books go. You've got to wait to the very end before you get to the really good stuff. But we got our first kind of workings of the Jedi Council and kind of seeing how it was laid out. No, not really different in terms of what we're used to seeing. Definitely some unfamiliar names. There were some familiar names and there were some really familiar names depending on, who was sitting on the council. But this chapter is primarily focused on Jorah Mali. And she's part of the Jedi Council. She's the one that they've mentioned she is going to take over. She's been assigned to the Starlight Beacon to kind of take over the Jedi contingent force that's there and kind of be the eyes and ears of the Jedi out in the Outer Rim on the space station. And she's aboard the what is it, Ataraxia, which is the Jedi ship. And I want to see what this looks like because they go and describe this thing as just this glorious, elegant ship, almost a temple of itself, right?
Right.
And we've already seen their, what they look like in the robes. We've seen the aesthetics that they've used for the High Republic. I really want to see this. And so far, at least as of this recording, we haven't seen anything just yet concrete of what it looks like. But
yeah, I really want to see just the range of Jedi vehicles in general in this timeline, because it just seems like they have such a unique design. And the way they're being described is it's descriptive, but it's really not descriptive quite enough. And so that visual and bringing some of the visuals that you've shared was really help, but because it is a bit unique from what we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, and so she's out in Felucia, which is like this, it seems like Star Wars has had this like love affair with Felucia ever since it was ever mentioned. Right. And we got it back in the, prequel trilogy, but I don't remember if it was ever named officially then, but then it's just been kind of toyed with. It pops in, and I think every series now has had Felucia in the background, including video games, right? So, but she's here, and she's kind of taken this. The Jedi Council is kind of coming together, and this is kind of a pivotal moment because this is very similar to what we saw in the prequel trilogy, where they're having to decide on whether or not this is something they want to engage with the Nihil, whether it's their role to do it. And it is, as it would turn out, there's an odd number of Jedi that are present, and so the deciding vote comes all the way back down to Jorah Mali. She has the final vote, and I've got a picture here of her. That's not really a picture. Again, that was the one I pulled from the Old Republic. But yeah, I mean, they're kind of going back and forth on whether or not they should interfere. And this is a really hard decision because, again, they're not warriors, right? They've, and half of them, some interesting introspects in terms of how they see the Force, those that are on the Jedi Council. Some of them really feel truly about the will of the Force. Others feel like, hey, it's, I wouldn't have these powers had it not been for the Force, and therefore we should step forward and we should be able to, save people. Other people are like, no, this is not our role. We shouldn't be a part of it. And so it kind of splits down the middle, and she has that last deciding vote. And Jensen, I want your thoughts on this because she's very much of the opinion that it's whatever the Force wills it, and she's got a very simple motto: does the action I'm about to bring does the action I'm about to take bring more light to the galaxy? That's it. It boils down to that. And if the answer is yes, it seems like she's willing to do it, right? I mean, probably within some limits, but.
Right. Yeah. And the whole argument, it was very reminiscent of before the Clone Wars, right? Where they were debating whether or not Jedis were or Jedi were warriors, and that, should they be involved in conflict? Should they insert themselves into conflict and create more conflict as a result? And of course, they don't know all those events yet, but it was an interesting parallel there with what we had seen in kind of our normal timeline that we've grown up with. But yeah, I like the challenging question because you could really interpret this still in a variety of ways. You can still like bringing light to, is it your job to bring light? I had a visual of like an evangelist, basically, right? It's my job. I have been divine. I have to, spread the word type of thing. And it kind of, it brought that memory out of me for some reason, because and I think mostly because you can view this differently. You could say, okay, we want to bring the Republic, everyone into the Republic, share that light, share the benefits and the all the things you can get from the Republic. Or you could be viewed as, pressing your beliefs on me. And so I thought it was very curious. And I mean, clearly her perspective was, if I can do good in the galaxy, then we should. Right. And these people are a threat. They didn't quite realize what kind of threat yet, which we will find out here in just a few minutes about what they were truly dealing with. And, but it was clear that, she was a bit ambiguous with the answer, but it was clear that they were going to have to, they don't really have much choice of inserting themselves. Yeah. But it was interesting kind of understanding the debate a little bit.
Yeah. And I think for Chancellor So, right, it's almost a vendetta for her at this point, given how many people that have died and the fact that they've had such an impact on their economy and just their way of life, their quality of life by having to shut down hyperspace lanes. And so none of that is lost upon her. And in her mind, she wants to eradicate this. She wants to stop this from festering and growing into something larger, right? It's kind of public enemy number one for her. And that's kind of where I think Jorah lands is, well, it's totally within our purview to do. We can do it. And if we're going to make the galaxy as a whole better, then let's go ahead and do it. And so she ultimately decides the fate here and casts that last vote that swings the council to go ahead and step forward with that.
Right. And I was actually reminded of Porter Engle. I don't know if Jeff's with us tonight, but we had to squeeze in a Porter Engle somewhere, right? Reference to him. But it was when he was addressing the Nile, it had a very similar type of tone of we need to serve justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have annihilated worlds. They don't quite know the extent of how the Nile have been involved with this, but they have they annihilated a world because they didn't save it on Eriadu, and they've caused conflict elsewhere, and they've they're people know them and people fear them, and they're starting to become more aware of it. And the Jedi are all about making sure that justice is served across the galaxy. It's the one time where they are actually pretty almost unanimous and okay with conflict.
Yeah. There is a line, but it's not a hard line, right? And there's a lot of ways you can justify that.
Right. I mean, clearly they want peaceful means, but they also aren't going to back down when there's a show of force.
Yes. And just a quick note, she is the master of Reath Silas, who is the bookworm Jedi that you'll read more about and know more about in Into the Darkness, which is by Claudia Grace. So that's the connection there. Okay, so let's get into this starts officially part 3, The Storm, which starts with chapter 36, The Outer Rim. We're in the Kerr Nebula, which is where the majority of the rest of this novel is going to take place, at least on the battlefront side.
Right.
And it's kind of like the beginning of the end for Kosov at this point. He's in his new ship, or he's in his ship, the New Elite, and he's been out there and he's been sent on this mission to try to intercept the flight recorder, right? They know the flight recorder is in transit. Marcion Rowe has this spy within the Senate, and that information has been made to them. So they've sent him out to kind of intercept this thing and stop it again before they're able to kind of piece together where the Nile are and find out where and track them down in some way. So he's got a whole ship. I mean, he's got like an entire armada of like 100 ships, right? He's got his entire Tempest fleet out here. So it's a pretty substantial size of force that he has. He's not, just 1 or 2 ships. There's quite a bit of them, and this obviously has a pretty big impact here in just a minute. But he's kind of feeling down about everything around the Nihil. And he points up that, I guess to the point of he's sizing up the other Tempest, and thinking about, do I really need to be here? I don't get any. I mean, yeah, we get the paths, but do I need those? I've got this large force. I don't really need to be a part of this anymore. I can go off and do my own thing. And he goes all the way to the extent of like naming it, right? What do you call it? The Inferno, or the, was it the fire? I don't know what it was. It was some flame analogy that he was using, right? And he was just kind of toying with this idea. And there's like, yeah, you know what? Screw this. I don't need to be a part of this, right? I don't need the paths. I can just go ahead and do whatever I want. And it's right at that moment where you feel like he's about to just say, screw this. I'm going to go do my own thing. Right. That Admiral Konara and the Third Horizon kind of come out of Lightspeed. And along with them are members of the RDC, which is the Republic Defense Coalition, and the Atraxia, which is the Jedi ship full of Jedi vectors. And they all show up right at the last minute, right where he's at. And you got to think, even as you're reading this, you're thinking, okay, there's no way this was coincidental, right? That if it was just a flight recorder, which was what it was supposed to be, it's just a flight recorder, maybe a couple ships for escorting, whatever, but almost an armada shows up, and he knows something's going on, and as a reader that something's going on.
Right. But I mean, even still though, I mean, they knew that the Republic knew how important the flight recorder was too, though, right?
Yeah.
So
true.
From Kaz's perspective, he might feel something is off, but he doesn't have quite that confirmation. But we do start to see him. Okay, he has to convince his own Tempest that fleeing to fight another day is okay here, because that's not their way of doing things. They overwhelm and they just swarm you and they annihilate you and they just take everything. They cannot be defeated. But when he sees this, even he's not dumb enough to say, okay, we're going to survive this with Jedi and everybody else. And so, so we started trying to turn tail a bit here. And you talk about justice being served. The one ship that comes in to block his way, of course, was by, what was her name? Meal?
Yeah, the governor.
Yeah. And from Eriadu, and their ship was just sitting there, looming in the background. So their escape was shut off, and now it's time to get your hands dirty.
Yeah, he gets so the Republic fleet, or the Jedi, are obviously under the command of Jorah Mali. They can't get into hyperspace, right? Like you said, they're almost kind of surrounded. They've got one way to get out, and that's, like you said, gets blocked by the Iraduans, or however you say that. They end up showing up here, and then right before he's like trying to get out of here, there's almost like a coup. So like Wetbub and Delix and Gravin, these are his three storms. They all stand up and they basically say, look, we talked to Ro before all this happened, and he said you were going to do this. Like their mission is to sit there and fight, get that recorder and not run away. And like you said, he's trying to reason with them like, guys, there's no way we can do this. Yeah, we've got a lot of people here, but we've got Jedi, we've got the RDC, we've got, the somebody that really wants our blood here and wants our heads. And like you said, let's go fight and live for another day. And he really tries to do his best and finally convinces him that that was the right choice. That if Marchion Ro had been here himself, he would clearly say, you guys have got to get out of there. And they're trying to hail Jorah Mali's trying to hail him. They're trying to get a hold of him. Or I think it's actually not Jorah Mali, it's the Admiral. Right. He's trying to hail them, and they're ignoring this. And then at the same time, he's trying to reach out to Marchion Ro, and he's like, get him on the line. We need paths. We need to get out of here. And so they call. Of course, they don't get any answer. Mm-hmm. And that's when he kind of gets this like feeling of, well, he's not answering the phone. I'm out here in this really horrible situation that I probably should not have been in. I have no way to escape at this point. So what does he do? He turns up the loud music and says, F it, let's go and let's do this. Let's try to, take some down with us before us. I mean, it's pretty much his last stand, except that this is probably where it may all end unless he can get a return phone call here from Marchion Ro.
Right. Yeah. And they start to actually do pretty well early on. They had the numbers of what they were fighting, and they were able to swarm them. They were still deploying mostly just conventional attacks, but even Kosov started to see that the tide were slowly, they were in a good position, but the Jedi weren't engaged yet. The ship looming in the background from the Iriaduans was not taking action either. So even he said, this is temporary. Mm-hmm. They are in a tough spot. And I think people probably started to feel that shift a little bit. And so then he goes over the air and kind of in a, marked of good leadership, right? Of really, that fighting spirit, and, gets a rise from all of these folks. And you can hear him saying, we are the storm, and all of this stuff. And then they decide to go ahead and just go completely crazy with, like, let's show them who the Nile really are.
Yeah.
And how we fight. And we talked very early on, we spoke about this, and even in our preview show, that they will deploy whatever tactics are necessary. They will gas people. They'll use chemical warfare and so on and so forth. And now we are seeing this about to be deployed in mass in space, which is just ludicrous.
Yeah. And hold that thought, because we'll get to that here in chapter 38 is when he finally lets loose, and we get the nasty tactics that they get into. So let's get into 37. And this is back on the Alfrona system. So Loden is in pursuit of that limping Nihil ship, right? He got a hit on, and but he does check in on Bell to see how Bell's doing, and Bell's like, "Hey, I'm alive!" Right? He just jumped out there, rescued B, and they both came down, and it's kind of a really cool moment. This is a very short chapter. It's kind of just between them two, but Loden, even in the midst of everything that's going on, right? He's still being this incredible person, this incredible mentor, this incredible teacher, and telling him, you did it, right? And you're amazing. I knew you could do this. And once this is all over with, right, in this very calming voice, at least the way it reads, very calming voice, once this is all over with, I'm putting in for you to be a Jedi Knight. Like, you've already earned it. And, it was almost kind of like his trial, right? This was the last thing he had to do, is prove himself to that, prove himself against what is, maybe his greatest fear, one of his biggest challenges. However that goes out in the High Republic days. Mm-hmm. And so, which is really cool. You get to think that, okay, wow, he's already going to become a knight. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really happen yet, but more on that here in a little bit. And then he does this crazy thing where he's, he realizes they've got to stop this ship, slow it down. So him and Nadira are kind of talking about it. And he comes up with a strategy where he kind of takes his ship, accelerates, turns upside down, avoids some shots, then flips the ship's 180 degrees so that it's facing nose to nose. It's almost like inverted from Top Gun, if you remember that reference. But no, he's like face to face, right? Nose, and he's flying the ship backwards, which is kind of mind-boggling to kind of picture. But I think he does a good job of explaining it. And then once that happens, then he does the mind touch on the pilot of the ship and gets her to slow the ship down so that Indira can board the ship. And the plan is like really simple. There's two of them. They both have a ship that hold at least one more person. There's two hostages still remaining. There's Otto, and was it the boy?
believe it's the boy. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm drawing a blank on his name now. Should have wrote that one down, but I didn't. But yeah, that's it. That's really the plan, to kind of get them out. And it's right about that time that suddenly there's an entire fleet of ships that come in. And now it's like almost the inverse of what is happening over on the Kerr Nebula system, or the Kerr Nebula. There is Lorna D and her Tempests have all shown up, and there's a ton of them, right? And they talk about this a little bit later, but the fact that they were in such a low orbit, and the fact that she was able to come in with her entire fleet in low orbit like that, this speaks to the paths, right? And we'll see that. We'll talk about it a little bit more. I'm going to get your thoughts on that here in just a minute when we get to the battle. And there's a comment made a little bit later by Marcion Rowe as well. But you start to realize just how powerful the paths really technically can be. It's not the days of what we know with Star Wars, where they come in out of light speed, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of miles away, whatever it is. These guys can really ascend on somebody at a pinpoint accurate position because of the paths. And we see that here.
Right. Yeah. And they described that to us very early on, that, they can jump in and out right next to you and then be out, do their thing, and they can get out. And that's what makes them so dangerous. There's just no way to anticipate them, and there's no way to really stop them when they're really on their game and they've really got a good plan. Yeah.
And this chapter ends with Lorna D gets the sun out, or not Lorna D, sorry, Indira gets the sun out, and Loden decides he's got to break off, and he decides to go ahead and take them head on, which Lorna D is kind of like, I think she literally says, "Good luck with that," right? You get this one Jedi vector against her entire Tempest, and he knows too. He's really just trying to bind. He's trying to figure out, how the heck am I going to get into this ship now and get Otto, the father, out, and that's kind of where this one ends. All right, let's get into 38. And yeah, so this is, like you said, Kosov and his Tempest, they're doing okay, right? I mean, they're kind of treading water, if you will. They're not losing a whole bunch of forces. They're doing just fine. But, this is where he is, number one, he realizes, it acknowledges, okay, they're up against a military force in the RDC, right? And so his guys really aren't trained. They don't really have like military type tactics. They're more about plundering and, guerrilla tactics and that sort of thing, right? So that's kind of where they are. He realizes as this battle continues to go on, that's probably not going to bode well for them in the long run, right? They're not going to be able to sustain this long term. And then number two, they've got the Jedi, that entire ship with all the vectors, and they've not even engaged. They're just sitting there idle, waiting for the order for somebody to tell Joramali, we need you to jump in now, right? So acknowledging that, he gets in this mindset of, you know what, I got nothing else to lose here, right? I'm trying to trapped in a corner. This is where he says, he tells everybody, fight free, fight dirty. And we get if you got some of the tactics that they use, because I think this is very shocking to the Jedi and really everybody. If you think about where we are in the time of Star Wars and just how peaceful things are, right? This is a far cry from what they're probably normally used to, little skirmishes here and there in the galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, they were using like waste sludge, which I had a really difficult time imagining in space, but apparently this is really just nasty stuff that will just blow everything up, or I'm guessing eat away at the cockpit, and presumably be pretty painful.
Yeah, it's flammable too.
Right, yeah. And so they just keep deploying these really senseless tactics, and the Republic is just stunned. I mean, this is an abomination of sorts of, not only, and at some point the Kosov's Tempest is starting to also, they're starting to succumb to some of this, and they're okay with taking each other out on some level. Now that's about to escalate here in a minute, but they were just stunned. They didn't know what to do because and Cornara was just beside himself.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine, I mean, this is like our own military expenses, or experiences out in Vietnam and Korea and all of that, or mostly Vietnam, and just the completely different style of tactic that you're just not necessarily prepared for because you didn't know you need to be ready for that kind of thing. And the Republic sustained it fairly well, but then some weird stuff starts to happen.
Yeah. So, that's a good point. Like as I was reading this, it's almost a combination of some of the tactics that we read about during the Vietnam War, and then later on, it's some of the tactics that the Japanese employed during, as kamikaze fighters, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in addition to that sludge or the ooze that they were throwing out there that was flammable.
Mm-hmm.
They were also like throwing toxic radioactive waste out there. So not only was that, impacting the ships themselves, but that was a long-term issue that people were going to have on both sides, being radioactive or being exposed to radiation, and not being, if they couldn't get to a medical base soon, that was going to have some permanent lasting effects, up to and including death. There was one guy that landed his ship right on the bridge, the viewport bridge of a larger ship, a Nihil, landed right there and then fired up his blasters, burning the glass and the viewports, trying to expose it. It didn't really go into details of what was going on, but it was certainly enough that it was, again, throwing people off. Like, this is stuff that they wouldn't normally, they don't train for this kind of thing, right?
Right.
And then the other one was they were deploying the harpooning tactics that we saw earlier on when they tried to capture some of the ships. They were harpooning them and just pulling them and ripping the ships apart. So again, it was pretty much chaos. And I think someone a little bit later mentions that that's what it was like. They were trying to attack chaos. They were trying to attack the storm, which was, how do you do that, right? And then, so at this point, the Republic ships are really kind of taking a beating. And that's when they reach out to Jora Mali and they're like, okay, we need you guys to join. And she's very calm. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. We'll help you now at this point.
Right.
And so, they ask Avar Chris to kind of do the, what are we calling, or what are we landing on for that term? They haven't given us one yet.
Yeah. Battle meld or force meld, probably force meld, because I imagine they can do this whenever they want.
Okay.
But battle meld, because they seem to only want to deploy the tactic when they're actually in battle.
Right. So she does this where she connects all of the Jedi together, and it kind of enhances their ability to fight because they can see and anticipate things better. Right? She's kind of that central brain, if you will. So she goes and does that, while Jora Mali it's like every Jedi that they've name dropped in this novel that's still alive
right.
is now here in this battle, and so they all jump into their vectors. They get into their formation, the drift formation, where they kind of get really close together that, no human, mortal person or normal person would be able to successfully pilot and do. And
reminded me of the spear that they had back in the New Jedi Order days.
The spear, what was that?
I think they created like a spear or something like that when they were doing.
Oh, the formation itself.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And there was a interesting on Jora Mali, and again, we get a lot here about her. A couple things more, like her viewpoints on the Force it seemed pretty just, again, more laid back. Like the Force was the Force. It was like, whatever it is, I don't stress about it. I don't think about it. And it didn't feel like she thought about it like in music or, fire or water. It just is. It is the Force. And that was all it was. And I like that because I didn't want this to be real gimmicky. I like the idea that they're able to see the Force in different ways. But at the same time, you got to think there are people that are just kind of like, no, it's just the Force. And they have the same viewpoints that I think we see from the Star Wars that we know, from, prequel on the way up to the sequel trilogy. But
right. It's more passive view of it all.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point. And to that point, there's we got to learn about her lightsaber, being a white lightsaber, and that she had purified it herself. She said she got it off an ancient Sith light spear, which I thought was kind of cool. The fact that exists now officially in canon. And it's so anyway, so they're in this drift formation, and this is when Marchion Ro decides that he's going to tell Kosov that there was that he's going to deploy some new tactics, right? And he's going to help them. And so he starts sending all of these Nihil ships using paths and making these small micro jumps into hyperspace. And it's like random. There's no rhyme or method to how they're doing it right now. It's literally just popping around. And so this is throwing people off. Not only that, but it's disrupting some of the vectors that these guys are on, or the paths that they're on. I don't want to use either one of those words because they mean something.
Right.
I'm trying to think of another word to use because those are both pronouns here. It's throwing them off. And unfortunately, one of these ships gets sent off, and it disappears, goes into hyperspace just shortly, and then reappears right in the middle of the formation, the drift formation that the Jedi are in. And this sends a couple of them, I think a total of 10 ships, I think is what they said, blew up or were destroyed. We got Skier, who loses his arm, which if you read the comic, it starts with him without an arm because it takes place right after this. This is where he lost his left arm. And then I guess the biggest casualty is the fact that we lose Jorah Molly in this whole thing. And Skier is thinking about her the whole time. I mean, we kind of skipped over, but it sounded like they had a history here. They were really good friends. They've been together, been through a lot together. And he no longer senses her after, the collision that occurred with this one Nihil ship jumping into the middle of the drift formation. And so we lose her, which was a surprise to me. I didn't think we would lose her because I think he did a good job of playing her up, but not putting her too far out there, right? It wasn't dangling the carrot too much. And, right before that, we've been led to believe that she was going to take over the Starlight Beacon and she was the one that was going to be on there and running everything. So you were kind of vested in that character and thinking, okay, I wonder how is she going to run things and how are things going to transpire after all of this? But yeah, she ends up dying here at the end. So
yeah, especially since we see her in Into the Dark as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was a bit of a surprise that we just didn't anticipate because it seemed. But I think this is also something we have to continue to watch: is that no character is safe on the Jedi, and we're at the end of this book. We get a really interesting epilogue. That's a bit of foreshadowing, but it's just crazy that we build this character up, and as soon as they started spending more time on her, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to kill her off.
Right.
It kind of felt like the beginning of the book where they did all this detail on these characters and then nope, you're gone.
Yep, they're gone after the first chapter.
Yep.
And we should mention too, I mean, Marchion Ro comes back. I mean, they're able to do this teleport thing because Marchion Ro comes back and is like, okay, I'm going to give you the paths. And then he says, I'm going to give you I think this is where he says, I'm going to give you what you need. And he has this speech where he starts talking to all of the Nihil, like broadcasts over their ships before he does this and tells them, that he's the Eye and the Republic are trying to take away their way of life. They want them dead. What gives them the right to do it? And then he says he's going to take care of the Nihil and help them to defeat their enemies. And that's kind of it. It's really abstract in terms of what he does until they suddenly see this. And they're all caught by surprise too. Like even, Kosov has never seen this before. These ships are no longer under their control. And I think at the end of the day, before we get into the next phase of what Marchion Ro does, I forget who it is, but I think it's Kosov that reflects on, he's like, it's not really doing anything, right? It's not really turning the tide one way or the other. It's just creating chaos, right. Which is probably what was the intent here, I think. Yeah. But let's see. I think that was all we had. It ends there, and we'll get into chapter 39. So back on Elfrona, excuse me. And this is where Loden he's doing a pretty good job now, right? So he was going to engage Lorna D's ships. And I think he does a pretty good job. He's diving in and out, trying to stay alive. But he knows this is not something that he can sustain, obviously. Right. And he tells Indira about the fleet that just appeared out of nowhere. And so he tries to cover her while she escapes with at least the sun, which she does. And then he figures out, he's got to get back onto this ship where Otto is at, this one last remaining Nihil ship. And he does this crazy thing where he jettisons himself out of the cockpit and kind of flows through space temporarily, catches his, was it right leg or left leg? I don't know which one it was. Yeah. Catches one of his legs on the way in, breaks it.
Yeah.
Yeah, then lands, and he's fortunately able to kind of shut the airlock off or close it up so, he doesn't fly out into space. Right. But now he's in pretty bad shape, right? He's got a busted leg. He's in the ship. They're surrounded by Nihil. Indira is the only person that really could provide any support, and she took off because she was trying to keep the sun safe. And It's right there at that moment that he hears the Nova blow up. So they've blown up the Nova being his, we didn't mention that, but the Nova is his vector, the name of the vector ship that he flew, and that's now gone. So he's really in a bad situation at this point.
Right. Yeah. And there's no real way to go out, but he does find Otto, and Otto's still alive, and he sees the Indira's work all around the place with a bunch of saber slashed Nihils kind of all around.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as he tries to figure out what's next, Lorna D and company shoot it was kind of like the equivalent of like a ballistic, what was it called in Empire Strikes Back when they went like an ion cannon, right? So something that will completely disable the ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like armor piercing type projectiles because that tip comes in, and I was thinking like in the Old Republic they have these, and I don't remember the name of it, but they happen quite a bit. A lot of times in the Old Republic they use them for boarding a ship. So they have these massive, like, I don't know what material they are, but they penetrate the ship, and then the ends of them open up, and then they deploy their people that way. And that's kind of what this was, because as soon as it comes in, these vents open up, and suddenly all this gas comes out. And so this is the same kind of gas tactic that we saw earlier on in the novel, and something that we see. I think we saw it in a Test of Courage as well. If you've read that one, the gas tactics in the comic book, they've made mention to it as well. So this does seem to be a very successful tactic, at least by the standards of what we've read so far, for the Nihil to use, and it's effective here. Like Otto immediately goes down; he's not able to kind of hold his breath or whatever. And Loden, as hard as he tries, is trying to stay alive, but this thing gets him. I mean, he's not in good shape, as it were, so he's probably not able to kind of fend off the gas or hold his breath as long as he needs to. He finally succumbs to it, passes out, and then like his last moments of the last thing he sees is what you see here. Or what's her name, Lorna D. Coming in, and a bunch of Nihil coming in, and he kind of passes out at that point. So, wasn't expecting this either. Like Loden he's done everything right, and he said it right before going into this. Right, he said it's going to take like 5 or 6. I think he called them miracles or something, whatever it was, before if his plan went right, but unfortunately it didn't. So,
right.
There's let me see, what are we on here? 43. There was one other point that I want to make. And that's Lorna D. She makes a comment about how this mission's accomplished, and that she was going to take she was squared up with Ro now, Marcion Ro, and I didn't really like. I don't know if it was because of, I've done this, and so I should be in good favor with him, or was this in response to him saying that she screwed up by, what happened with the, earlier on with, what was it, when they attacked, they were stealth and they were trying to find the flight recorder, and they went ahead and attacked anyways, right? I wasn't sure if it was one or either one of those, maybe it's both.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I thought it was just, finally recovering, and she's going to give him the gift of a Jedi plus this other high value person, which she still doesn't really know anything about and has started to care a lot less. But yeah, I think it just squared him up, and it's the couple of mistakes they made because they weren't real happy with her. It was another time too, but yeah, that was the major one, and so now they're even Steven, I guess.
Yeah. In chapter 40, so we're going back now to the Kerr Nebula, and we're just kind of ping-ponging here, but back to the Kerr Nebula. There's so this is where Admiral Krenora is like, this feels like we're fighting a storm, right? You're trying to shoot down a storm because of just how chaotic this is, and the fact that, in fact, he can't even believe it. He's like, I don't believe this, but I'm seeing it, so I have no choice but to believe that they're able to do this. Mm-hmm. And Avar Kriss is trying to interpret what's going on too, and she's having a hard time trying to understand this. Like, she's trying to use her abilities to try to understand the tactics themselves. And I love it because we talked about Charles Soule being a big musician. I think he plays guitar, and that was why he wanted Avar Kriss to kind of have this. I see the Force as music, but he talks about it being choppy, staccato. Right? These are all terms from music, right? Musical terms that were, if you know what those are, it's kind of like it gives you it almost gives you a visual of what's really happening, right? This herky jerky kindness going on. And she finally locks in, right? To some degree, she's able to understand the song, and she's able to at least anticipate. Like, she can't predict where they're going to do these little micro jumps, but she's at least able to, anticipate where they're going. And so this Elzar man is like picking up on this big time, and he goes into his whole Poe Dameron, flying around, taking him down left and right kind of thing. Right. So it feels like things are about to really go well. And there was a cool quote in there from Elzar Mann too. He was talking about how it was their the fear, right? That made them strong. Their
anger and their fear.
Yeah, their anger. That's what it was. The anger is what made them strong, but at the end of the day, it's also what made them weak, because he could sense the anger that they had, along with Avar Kriss enhancing his abilities. He was able to go in and start taking these guys out. And this is where, go ahead.
And they didn't really explain what it was that she figured out though either, which I was a little disappointed. I wish Charles Soule would have give us a little bit better idea of what she sensed, aside from it, as it was like she was filling in the gaps of the music, or she could just sense these pieces here and there. But I did like how they at least explained that they were able to, sense those emotions, and what was driving them. And once they can pinpoint that, then it's like a burning flare, right in their face, and the Jedi can hone in on that. And really, it's as good as seeing and as good as looking into the future. They know exactly what to do.
Yep. And here's at this point, this is where things get really take a turn for the worse for a lot of people, right? So Ro then hails Kosov again, and it's funny because he tells them this is the first of many victories, right? And that line alone tells you, okay, we've got little hints, little bits of little hints, I guess, of this prior leading up into this moment. But the fact that he says that this is the first piece of the plan to go in says you a lot. Right? This is the first victory in a line of many. And, that being the killing of Kosov or having him sacrifice himself the way he's about to in just a minute here. And he has a conversation with him. He tells him, or he asks him, "You killed my father, didn't you?" And which, Kosov is like, dude, we're in the middle of like this battle. He never says he didn't, which I thought was interesting. Right? He never said, I didn't do that. But the fact that he's trying to have this conversation about, what's going on, he's like, we'll talk about this another time. I need you to give me these paths so we can get the heck out of here, because this isn't doing anything for us, really. And then he makes a comment. Rose says, okay, well, listen, if it's not you, right? He vows that if it's not you, then I'll follow up with Lorna D and Panethia or Panetta. And if I need to, I'll exact vengeance on them at some point as well. So it's become very personal, I think, for Marchion Ro. And like, he's been harboring these feelings in his past is finally starting to really surface and manifest here.
Right. Yeah. And when we saw the turn before, several chapters ago, when he's confronting all of them and he has the interaction with Kosov specifically. But this is really kind of where it turned cold, I think. Like, I remember when I was reading it, just the feeling I had was just this really cold approach to Ro, to where he was not only resolved, but now the plan was in motion, and it was time to basically tell Kosov in very clear terms that, I'm sacrificing you and your Tempest, for us. And that's the way it's going to be. And by the way, like you said, here's this other transgression I'm pretty sure you were a part of. And
right.
I think we assumed that Kosov had something to do with his father's death anyway. They hinted as much. And I think Kosov did he actually admit to that before, or
No, I think he made a comment about his father's death, but I don't think he, not in any terms, said, yeah, I was part of it, or I did that, or he had it coming, kind of thing.
But it was always weird because Kosov always seemed to hold his father in some sort of regard. He liked the way that he ran things. But of course, later on, we realized that Marchion Ro was like, this place was a chaotic mess when Dad ran it.
Right.
And, but yeah, so this is I really just felt him go cold at this point, to where, you tell someone you're not even thanks for everything. Just, you're great.
Yep.
So, see ya.
I hadn't thought about that, honestly. That's a good point. Like he did hold him in high regard. So what happened, right? What caused him to suddenly shift or turn on them in that way? Dante brought up a good point too. I wonder if all of them collectively killed his father. I'm sure they all had a hand in it, right? And you got to think, like, to what end, or what were they trying to do?
Right.
Which we can speculate. We don't have time to do it tonight, but there's a lot of possible scenarios that could have that they were trying to go for here.
Sure.
If they did do that. So at this point, Marchion Ro says, again, thank you, goodbye. He hangs up and then sends these ships into like this next phase of teleporting. And I've got the image up here from The Last Jedi of Snoke's ship getting split in half by
Holdo maneuver.
The Holdo maneuver, yeah, because essentially this is what it is. He starts sending these ships into other ships using the path generators, right? The ship engines that were made to travel through the paths, and he's purposely sending these things into each other and again into other ships, and they're going kamikaze. Essentially, is what they're doing. They're killing each other, killing themselves, sacrificing themselves to take out all of these ships. And everybody's in horror. Everybody's like shocked. The fact that Krenara has never seen anything like this. The Jedi have to be completely floored that somebody would take their own life, much less, or much more the life of others for that reason. And then you've got these Nihil who aren't even in control of their ships at all. Right, their ships are being like remotely controlled and they're being sent to their deaths to detonate in other ships or appear in other ships right in the middle of things. And one of them actually hits the Third Horizon, which is the ship that Cronora's on. Luckily, it's big enough and it was able to sustain the damage. I think it says it took out like 2 floors or 2 levels or something on the ship itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is where really things really get out of hand at this point. And the Jedi they're defenseless. They really don't even have a defense to this. If you think about it, right? That's how do you stop that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we didn't really get a perspective of any of the other Nile, which is pretty much all through Kosov's lens. So we don't even know what kind of chaos that was ensuing. Like, what was the frame of mind for all of these people who were, just feeling completely out of control. You don't know what's going on. And then you start seeing them, especially when they're running into each other and blowing each other up. They're doing as much damage themselves as they are to the Republican Jedi ships. But this is, you look at this and it's just chaos. I mean, and Krenar says it best with, it's like a storm, because you can just imagine there's just things going off all around you. And you're powerless to do anything about it. You just have to kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, weather the storm, right?
Well played, sir. Well played.
Man, your dad humor is wearing off on me.
I like reek of it. There's this is where also finally Governor Merle Veen, right? So the Iraduans, she finally, again, they've been sitting idle this whole time. They've not done anything. And Kosov makes a mention of that, I think, in a chapter before this, or something along the lines of, he knew they were intentionally just sitting there idle, not attacking because they were trying to intimidate, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that you've got all this battle going on, it's kind of similar to like, there's shades of like Return of the Jedi, where, all the Star Destroyers were just kind of sitting there waiting and they weren't attacking. And that came up like, why aren't the Star Destroyers attacking? It's partly what it is. It was the Emperor trying to play these mind games and say, look, they're already suffering. And I've got all these Star Destroyers still yet to engage in combat. The same kind of tactic here. And these guys, I think we skipped over it, but we should mention they're kind of like the Mandalorians, I guess. That was the only way I could kind of only thing similar, I think, from a canon perspective that people could probably relate to. But they were warriors. They were all about vengeance. They were kind of these were people. These were a people that you did not want to tick off. And so of all the races in the galaxy, Kosov picked the short straw on this one, right, and a short stick on this one. And going against somebody like this, because I mean they've been tracking him down and after him, and to the point where now, as this battle is starting to kind of whittle down, and there's really not many Nihil ships left except the flagship and smaller ships that are engaged in skirmishes. This is where she steps in and she's like, "Hey, can we go ahead and take the flagship?" And she asks Krenora this, and of course he's like, "Yeah, that's fine, you can do it." And so they don't just like blow up the ship; they like disable it. Like they purposely, systematically began to disable his ship system by system. And it's almost like they're just bleeding him out. Like it's 1,000 cuts, right? Death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. Completely incapacitate the ship, then board the ship. And that's when Kosov realizes that, holy crap, I recognize that voice when she comes on board. And he immediately scrambles, trying to make a deal. Like, hey, I can, he's thinking about, I can give the Republic information. I can give them information. I don't have any allegiance to Martian Rel. He sold me out. He left me out here for dead. And he's like, mid negotiation when she just pulls out a gun or a blaster and kills him cold dead right there. And then,
right.
And that's it. I mean, that's Kosov's story. Unfortunately.
Well, she told him she described them many chapters back as predators, and you are now our prey, and we will not stop, and you will pay for everything that you've done. And I imagine from Veen's perspective, though, it couldn't have been all that satisfying. It's one of those things of, you finally enact your revenge and you feel like you've taken care of the thing, and then it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just kind of left with everything else, even still, right?
Yeah.
But again, I guess depending on their culture, though, that might be all they need. They just need vengeance, and then everything's clean. But I like that it was very much predatorial, and you're right. She was very pinpoint accuracy, taking out all of these different things to disable the ship, which was really cool. And again, to your point before, this whole intimidation tactic. We are doing things to you, and you have absolutely no power over it. Doomsday is coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was almost like they were going for the killing blow. Like they weren't so much worried about engaging. I mean, I'm sure they would have loved to, but at the same time, right, given everything that was going on, I think it was more important to them to get that killing blow in which is what they did. Taking out the flagship and then taking out Kosov.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they could have just destroyed the ship.
Right.
But they wanted to do this personally.
Mm-hmm.
Face to face, eye to eye, look them in the eye whenever you do it.
Yep.
And get that satisfaction for her people. So it's pretty cool, man.
Yep. Okay. 41. We're back in no space. So this is fast forward. Oh, I should mention too, at the end of this chapter, everybody thinks, well, most everybody, at least there, think this is it, right? The Nihil are gone. They had, Kosov's Tempest was hundreds of ships. And so in their minds, that was probably the entire fleet, or that was probably all of the Nihil ships. And thank goodness this is, we've done it, right? So celebration banners are going up. This comes up a little bit later, so we'll talk about that here.
But that was a bit, when I read that was a bit of a ridiculous assumption, though, wasn't it?
I think so.
Because they already knew they knew Lorna D's ship already, right? So they know that there's another one out there, and they've seen these others that were doing it. And I mean, granted, they probably weren't scanning every single ship,
right?
But if they would have seen another one that they already had on file, you would have presumed that it would have caught their attention. So maybe there was just a miss there. And of course, they clarify this pretty quickly. But when I read that, it just seemed that was just a little much.
A little obtuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that whole battle, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't think they took an inventory when it started, and at the end of it, it literally says there's just debris scattered everywhere from all of these ships, people flying, floating around in space. I mean, it's really a really huge battle scene at this point. So there really wasn't anything for them to probably identify. But yeah, I would. They're smarter heads prevail a little bit later here with that assumption. Cooler heads. It's supposed to be cooler. I said smarter. I think they both work. All right.
I think it works in this case.
41. So we're back in no space aboard the Gaze Electric, which is Marchion Ro's main ship, his flagship. And Marchion Ro and Lorna D are there with Otto and Loden. He's passed out. He's completely cold out from the gas already, and he's playing with his lightsaber and tells Kosov he's playing with the lightsaber, and it tells Lorna D that Kosov is now dead, right? And he basically says, like, what do you think about that? And she suspects it's Ro, like she knows something's going on here. And you get this really eerie feeling too, the way when you're reading this, like she's aware, like she feels like he's like 2 seconds away from beheading me. Cause he's got this lightsaber out. He's flinging it around. He's having a very kind of casual, psychotic. If you've ever seen, the movies where this guy's completely lost it and you can't tell if he's, coherent or not, or if he's, completely lost his mind, or you don't want to really push him too far. That's kind of what's going on here. He's in a different mindset at this point, and it's kind of worrying her a little bit, right?
Well, and she instinctively took a step back whenever he ignited the lightsaber.
Yeah,
and you're right. It could have, they kind of make it seem it's a little bit like it's a lightsaber, but no, it's the person wielding it that she has come unhinged, and she's not really sure what to expect. But she's actually taking steps back as a result of this. And of course, as they talk, he points it right in front of her face, which that would mess with you just a little bit.
Yeah, and he's like, and she's got a good point. Like, she's trying to rationalize, how does somebody go ahead and why would somebody kill 1/3 of their forces?
Right.
Like, to what end? What is there to gain from this? Right. She's not even, and of course, there's a master plan here at play from Marchion Ro, but from her perspective, it's like that makes no sense. Someone has to be completely unhinged to have done something like that, and that's what kind of gives her pause. As she's
to her credit, though, she tells him exactly what she thinks happened.
Yeah,
she's still straight shooter, no BS, anything like that, and didn't try to sugarcoat it or anything like that. So she was still true to character and just gave him what she thought it was. I mean, she was right on the money, of course, with her summary of how he set Kosov up. But yeah, again, still doesn't understand why would you sacrifice 1/3 of their forces, and of course, Marchion Ro reminds us later on that you have to trim the weak. You have to, and we eventually find this is going to be a rallying cry.
Mm-hmm. There's this is the first chapter, and I think we get some more here in 43. But we start getting, again, towards the very end of the book. We finally get more information, some background on Marchion Ro. Mm-hmm. We learn that he came from something he wanted to escape. And as I was writing this down, like, we're not going to do it tonight, and we'll maybe touch on it, but I almost want to come back and do a speculation show on just Marchion Ro. And I don't know, maybe I'll do something while you're out, or if you want to, you're going to be out for like 2 weeks. But if you want me to wait, I'll wait. But I was almost thinking about doing something solo here, but speculating on Marchion Ro, because there's hints. We don't get the We don't get the clear answer, but he says that he came from something that he wanted to escape. He and his father both got out, right? So it sounds like they were trapped, imprisoned, held against their will, whatever it was. Somehow they broke out of that and got away from it. Mm-hmm. And he says that they had a plan, him and his father, that involved the Nihil, all the paths. And he says it was always going to be like this. Since the day I was born, I thought I escaped. I didn't, though. Not really. I don't know what even that possibly means at this point, right? But again, he's just dropping all these hints. And it's at this point that Lorna feels like, that she feels trapped. Like she doesn't know, she can't get out of this.
For her, that's a big deal because if you remember from early on, she's always she's the strategist of the group. Yep. So she's always got that plan. She's always got that, she knows all the ins and outs, and there's no way out right now.
Right. And then Lorna also questions why the father was so important. Like, why was this Otto Blythe? Why was he so important? And Marcia Monroe's like, oh, this guy ignites a lightsaber and just kills him in cold blood right there. And that's when you realize, and she's shocked and horrified. So does Loden, Greatstorm. He's completely shocked. And that's when he kind of spills the beans that he was really going after a Jedi this entire time. And I think it's a little bit later, but I'll just kind of steal the thunder now. He has that conversation with them where Loden's like, I recognize your voice. And then he kind of rehashes some of the lines he used when he was the guy reporting to Loden and Bell and Porter Engle back on
Elfrona.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that he was the voice that said, hey, there's a family in dire straits, in need. Can you guys help? That was actually him. So again, way back even then, this has all been part of his original plan. And knowing that there was a Jedi outpost on there and that he needed a Jedi for something, which we don't know just yet what that is. Right. But this was the final piece. And so everyone up until now, the MacGuffin was, Otto Blythe, and it really wasn't him, right? It was like a false MacGuffin, if you want to call it that.
Right. And he knew it was a bit of a shot in the dark too. He knew he needed one. He had no idea how he was going to get one though.
Yeah.
And then Lorna D, somehow delivered one, and so his wildest dreams came true. He'd never met a Jedi either. But we find out later what his family appears to have a lot of history with Jedi.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I got some theories on that. All right. Chapter 42. So we're back on Coruscant. And this is kind of like, you can hear the music playing, right? The Ewoks are singing and it's yub yub time. So we're back. This is Lena So, and she's kind of meeting with the group, most of the same group that she met at the Monument Plaza way back in was it I don't even know, like chapter 3 or 4, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And she says that she's that she loves the Jedi. She proclaims her love for the Jedi and how wonderful and amazing they are, which we all know already. But how much they were, she just speaks to how helpful they were out through the entire process. And she says that she's going to reopen the hyperspace lanes now. So again, in her mind, she feels like this is the end of it, which of all people, you would think she would be the one that would be like, nope, still not. But again, she was under a lot of pressure though, right?
Right. Well, she's got to give people that sense of calm, and then that the danger is immediately gone. And they did caution her against, we do get a meeting that we talked about before about, the Nihil are extinguished. They're gone. We've rid them from the galaxy. But I think it was Krenara said, we don't have all the facts yet. So let's strike that from the speech and give people comfort, but let's not say that we've completely eliminated this threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's these last 4 chapters actually are really a lot of, they're laying a lot of the groundwork for stories and other books and stuff. And right. That's one of them, right? The hyperspace lanes being open. Another one that came out in this chapter is she makes mention that there's all the Navidroids, right? They've kind of depleted a lot of these things because of what Tar did. Yeah, there's a shortage now. And we learned that he did follow through on joining the Santekas. So they're out there doing stuff, doing who knows what. But they have some ideas on how to use this array, this droid array that they've created in the future. And so she wants to kind of capitalize on some of that. And she says that what they've come up with will revolutionize hyperspace travel and even have some applications in real space. So that all kind of, again, points to the astromech droid or maybe what comes from that. But she sees it as another potential great work, right? Which we know she's kind of infatuated with and trying to do that.
But we do get is the Great Works has been a bit of a a ping pong back and forth of whether or not it was an ego thing or if it really was just betterment of the galaxy. And now we're firmly back in the betterment of the galaxy thing. She just wants to see the galaxy excel and to see everyone, progress and to, really do care about everyone from if you're rather in your core or you're on the very outreach of the Outer Rim.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nutini made a comment there of this plan was far-fetched. I think he's referencing Marchion Rose, and I agree with you there. That was it was quite far-fetched. And he also made a comment about Mission Accomplished banner, which if you were around in the
90s.
Yeah. No, after
2000s?
Yeah, this is George W. Bush on the aircraft carrier, and they put Mission Accomplished in the background, but we weren't quite done yet.
Yeah, all right.
But I had the same thought there too. So if you're from the early 2000s, that comment made
it should resonate with you,
right?
Yeah, because we saw that, and he was forever immortalized with that banner up there. Oof, there's and so some of the other stuff. Okay, so Senator Noor and Jenny Wataro are planning this victory speech, and that's when finally, I think who was it? Was it Kanara? Who somebody stepped forward and was like, "Okay, time out. Let's not put the mission accomplished banners up just yet. You may want to rethink your speech and just say, hey, at least the threat for now has been contained, but not the Nihil are gone. Go back to business as usual, right?" So,
yeah.
And then they're going to use some of the other things that we got that were again laying the groundwork. We know now the Starlight Beacon's going to open up on time or as planned, so they're going to have that little festival here that we'll get to, and it's covered in the comics and a couple other places as well. But they're going to use that for the Quarren Mon Calamari peace accords. So I think we're going to go there. That'll be interesting to see at some point down the road. And she says this is the first of many Starlight Beacons to come. So that was already kind of laid out a little bit earlier, but I'm interested to see how that's going to, what does that look like, right? This doesn't seem like something they're just going to throw up in 90 days. So they're going to have to start construction on this if they've not already started construction on one of these things. And so you kind of think of like, Return of the Jedi and just how exposed or how vulnerable something like that can be in the process of being built. And that seems like a really easy target for somebody like Marchion Ro or whoever, right? So we'll see maybe something there too. And this chapter really, go ahead, sorry.
No, and I'm actually starting to have other speculative thoughts too about whether or not Marchion Ro tries to go and capture one. And then what that could actually mean, what would he be able to do with something like that if he were to take over one? That's not really their style, but it just kind of occurred to me that I wonder if that'll ever be there's a reason for any of that.
Yeah. This chapter ends with So kind of reflecting on all the, the vision of many worlds, the one galaxy. It's kind of the button or the bow on her narrative and really kind of her vision for the galaxy. It's a really great chapter, and it's a really good ending for her, at least. And I don't want to rehash everything. Go read it. But, she says it's one galaxy with everyone feeling included and wanting to do their best to contribute. One goal, one sentiment. We are all the Republic. Kind of cool, right? I mean, again, such a contrast to somebody like that lazy bum Sidious or Emperor Palpatine or Chancellor Palpatine, right? But yeah. So that's kind of the end for her. I think. I thought I had a different one here. All right, so 43. We're almost at the end here. This one has a lot in it, and there's a lot that's thrown at you and gives you much more insight into Marchion Ro. But it starts off interesting enough. He's kind of pulled all of the so this is No Space. We're on the Great Hall of the Nihil, right? So this is where they gather everybody together, and he's gathered all of the Nihil, and he's replaying the battle of at the Kerr Nebula, right? And replaying some of the selective voice quotes from Kosov, right? This is a what do you call it? I can't think of the name now. It's a video, right? It's been spliced together to kind of paint a narrative that really didn't happen. And he's using it. Thank you. I don't know why I can't think of that word. It's a propaganda video. And he's using Kosov as a martyr.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's done this. And again, I think that was part of the plan. He needed somebody to kind of fit that role and be a rally cry for and allow him to kind of step up, allowed him to step up into this new role as the Eye. He's a little bit different now. He's wearing he's got a new helmet. He's got his father's fur coat on that he's never worn before. It's almost like a king, right? I think that crown, like that, the helmet even has like a crown embedded on it somehow. But it is signaling that he's in a brand new role at this point. He talks about how Kosov implored these tactics, that he did it for the Nihil, and he did it for everything they stood for. And then he says, I am the I, Marchion Ro. I am the Nihil, and so are all of you, followed by, this is the moment, another step on the path. And that's in his head. He says, this is the moment, another step on the path. So again, these are things that he's been planning for a very long time, and the pieces are kind of falling into place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's amazing sound bites. And of course, when you go back and reread the battle chapter, you could just, they're just front and center. They're clearly things that would be great motivators, because you can just sense the excitement of it. But you also sense that the other two Tempests, the crowd is a bit uncertain about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And they're a bit uncertain about Marchion Ro. And they're uncomfortable. I mean, the impression I received, at least, was that they're a bit uncomfortable with him now in this role that he has just assumed. Right. Now, maybe it's, since he's making the speech, it's not a big deal, but he doesn't really talk to the masses very much, and definitely doesn't do it for this, to this extent. And so it was a very different dynamic, but slowly he starts winning the crowd. And again, they've got this video kind of playing on the dome above them, where the shield is at, from the Great Hall. But you can just feel that energy and that excitement. And it's just it's just like any other pep rally of sorts, right? When, as you get more animated and you get yourself more excited, no matter what you say, people are going to cheer and they're going to shout. And then we get a really interesting thing with the blood of Kosov, which is always, this is always very symbolic, of course, but
putting blood. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it was. So they all these droids kind of pop out of the ground, and they have these bowls, right, with a red liquid in them. And Ro, says that this is the blood of Kosov, and he drags his three fingers and makes a lightning bolts on his face. We are all the storm now.
Yeah, it's very like there's like a lot of Catholic symbolism going on here, right, with the blood, and like you think of like Ash Wednesday and putting the ashes on your forehead and then marking themselves with the blood. And I mean, there's parallels to like just typical, like war paint and stuff like that.
I was really amused, though. I was really amused. Sorry to interrupt. I was really amused that Ro was like, no one's ever going to ask the question of where we got this blood. Right. He died in space. And then that what creature did all of this blood come from? Because this is more blood than what's in a body anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Nihil, so.
Right. It was just curious, that line of thought of what he's saying. And basically, I think he's just saying, if you put the right cause in front of these people, they will follow you blindly. And that's when he knew he had them. And this was that moment to change it. Could he win over the people in that respect? And that's how I interpreted those comments of making sure that, kind of like when he did before, this is the moment. So he's got to seize it, and he's got to do it right. Mm-hmm. And he does it, perfectly. And he had all the right tools to be able to do it. Everything really came together perfectly.
So I want to take a step back, because there was a moment there also, like, well, first off, you're right. They were uncomfortable at first. They, the clapping and the applause and all that cheering was kind of timid at first. Right. And as things went on, right, he was weaving this tale and really kind of getting their buy-in about who they were and who they were becoming, more importantly. And he touches on this here in a little bit, but he then takes his helmet off, right? And so like the Tempest had seen him before, and it wasn't a big deal, right? But he's never taken his helmet off in front of all of the groundlings, right? All the other, the whole group of Nihil.
Right.
And so from their perspective, they're seeing a lot of different things happening here, right? They are seeing the shift visually, physically right in front of their eyes. And they now have a single point, a single person that they follow, as opposed to maybe their Tempests, right? Mm-hmm. They're used to following them, and yet, this guy's on a pedestal, or he's above everybody else, and he's talking about how he's now the leader. He's almost taken this role, and the other two aren't fighting back. They're not vying for power. So, they're probably looking at them going, oh, I guess this is where we're going, right? We're following this person now. And I think a lot of it too, I think the Nihil are probably at a point where they want to feel like they're following one person, right? Maybe there's some of them that don't like the fact that they've had this, this three-headed Hydra, and they were all kind of vying with power and doing all that. He was trying to preach a different message, that no more of that, right? We're all one Nihil. And I'm going to steal that, because he says, go, bring me more Nihil, as many as you can. and I'll give you everything. But when he takes his helmet off, everybody else starts taking their helmets off really as well. So that's almost kind of symbolic of, hey, I'm just like you, right? I take my helmet off and we're all the same, or at least we're all the same underneath. And then
I was curious though, is Lorna and Pan still had their helmet on?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he had to look at them, and it still seemed like they didn't want to do this, but they did.
Yeah.
It was another one. Go ahead.
No, I think it's identity thing. Like, I think it's really, he was preaching more of a homogenous kind of, even though they're all different aliens and races and whatever else, but I think he was really pushing for this. We're not individuals anymore. We're not going to be these different factions. We're all one. He's kind of doing on a smaller level what Chancellor So is doing, right? She's trying to pull everybody together in the galaxy. He's trying to pull all of Nihil together and make them kind of one cohesive unit, I guess, or maybe not a cohesive unit, but at least one unit to start with.
Right.
And there's something that he says also too that gets into his background that I want to dig into a little bit at some point. He says none of them had ever seen his face before. It didn't matter that they did now. None of them knew who he was. He wasn't Marchion Ro either. Okay, so I'm taking that from a literal perspective because he even says his name was, and then there's an ellipsis and it says it didn't matter. So it seems like Marchion Ro is not really his name. So he's got some other real name he's been going by Marchion Ro. Maybe it's his first name, or maybe his father took that name. If you think about it, if they were trying to escape or get away from something, they probably changed their name so they couldn't be followed or tracked or be identified in some way. So interesting that he would change his name and that they were going to that level of hiding. And then he says where he came from was gone, either other than the lessons it had taught him and a few tools that he had stolen when he left. So more on his background. He had some lessons that were taught.
Do we need to know his name? I mean,
no.
When they set it up like that, it just seems like there's something like that. There's something important about it, or something important behind it. I mean, I'm like having Baby Yoda flashbacks a bit here of whether or not it's important. But why would they tease it that way if it didn't have some other connection to it?
I mean, this is all this. I don't want to say it's the Rey Skywalker thing all over again, but it is a what's in a name, right? Star Wars has always preached, whether you like it or not, that it doesn't matter what your name is. It's a matter of, who you are and who you call family, or who you whatever, make peace with at the end of the day. That said, we as fans like for things to be connected, right? A lot of times. And it gets to a point where it becomes too connected. The galaxy feels too close and too small. But, what if that name is, and I'm just making stuff up here. This is like literally right now. What if that name is Palpatine? Or what if that name is, I don't know, pick I'm thinking like Sith Lords. There were some famous Sith Lord, right? And Revan, right? Or I don't know. If it's something like that, then it's like, whoa. I mean, I think it starts setting things up in your head, at least for headcanon, and making you wonder, like, okay, now this is all going to be tied. I think there's some implications, or there's some lines that you can draw back depending on what the name is. But to your point, does it really matter? I don't know. I don't think that it does. It just sets up that character with a little bit more history and allows them to maybe connect with the readers maybe a little bit more easier. I don't know. It's a good point.
We should get this out of the way now. Marchion Ro, is he Plagueis?
Well, yeah, exactly. Is it Plagueis? I don't. Right. And maybe I wouldn't think they'd redo that, but
yeah, that was changing his entire species, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. So anyways, it is intriguing, and there's a lot of speculation that can go with that we'll have to dig into a little bit more.
It sure seems like a setup to me, though. So, like you said, we'll have to see where it goes. But again, it was very telling that everybody removes their helmet. They've got this connection now. They're becoming something else. And you were, as you were saying, now they don't even have these tiers. Like strikes and clouds appear to all be, these
eliminated
ranks.
Them all. Yep.
Yeah, the ranks all seem like they have evaporated, and they are all the Nihil, and they need to become the storm. They are the storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just really, of course, things that you really get energized by, especially if you're crazy like these people are. They want to be part of something special, and they want to have that enthusiasm for it. And he's provided all the right tools. He's got all the tools and the right scenarios to do in order to bring that to them. And they all bought right in. everyone starts painting the blood on their face, and total cult going on here.
Exactly. It was the Lord of the Flies kind of thing that was happening.
Yeah. Temple of Doom.
Yeah. There's one last thing on it's Kalima Shock today. There's one last thing on the name. I think it does matter, because if it turns out that their last name was like Olay, like Rick Olay from episode 1, who cares, right?
I already had one eye roll moment at a name in this book. Please don't make me do another one.
It was kind of a joke, but you get my point, right? It's like the name does mean something. It can mean something good or bad. It's the difference between Rick Olay's ancestry and somebody like Revan. But okay. All right. So let's get to serious here. Okay. So Loden, we're back at the so Ro heads into like this I guess it's the prison area, right?
Right.
And there's 8 cells, and 7 of the cells have these people, like these poor beings that really had nothing to do with anything we've learned, talked about. They're not, as far as we know, they're not prisoners of like any of the ships or anything like that. These are just people randos. They picked up off the street, randoms, right? Randos. And then in that 8th chamber is where Loden Greatstorm is. And he set this chamber up so that it's systematically, periodically shocking and inflicting pain on these 7 people. And the way this works is because they are in such perpetual pain and agony and strife and all that, it's clouding Loden Greatstorm's ability to use the Force, because he is so in tune with all of that, right? Being the light and the powerful and great light that he is, having all these people around him just perpetually suffering and being inflicted with pain, it's stopping him from being able to just even concentrate. I think he can't block it out. It's like which I thought is kind of a neat tactic and a neat trick. And we learned that this was something that he learned from was it grandmother?
Yeah, and she learned it from her grandmother. So clearly there's a lot of history and a lot of knowledge about the Jedi, and there is some conflict, and we don't know what that is yet, but there is some conflict. And what I think some of the torturing someone in one way is fine. You're like, well, Jedi should be able to do that. The issue that they really are creating, though, or what he's creating in the scenario, is that these people are unable to sleep as well. So the shocking keeps them awake. They can't get any sleep, and then over time, you just go mad.
Yeah.
So not only do you have anger and despair and pain and all these things, but eventually you have madness to deal with, and just the chaotic of feeling of just losing your mind and then cracking is overwhelming to a Jedi. And he's got enough. If one of them dies, okay, there will be another one to replace them. So we'll just keep churning them out, and that's how to control it. And like you said, somehow this was passed on, that the way that you control a Jedi is you just inflict them with pain, but not in the traditional sense. You have to do it emotionally.
Yeah, I think it's inflicting the pain on others has more of an effect than inflicting pain on the Jedi. Right? They're going to be able to suppress it. They've probably gone through training and all of that to kind of help, but how do you stop?
His leg is still right, and his leg is still broken.
Yeah,
and they didn't give him any kind of medical attention or anything like that. So he's dealing with his own physical pain as well, and just not doing very well.
Yeah, and there's also a moment too where Loden tries to use the mind touch, right, or the mind control or whatever. He tries to mind touch him, and Ro's able to stop him. And he says, "It's not going to happen, Jedi. My family knew all about you people. They told me what you could do and how to resist it." So again, more clues to his background. So are they Sith? Is his family Sith? Were they followers of the Force? Were they acolytes on what was it, the planet from the Rise of Skywalker? Again, I'm thinking about this in the moment, so I'm not really thinking. But yeah, I mean, there's something here. There's definitely something substantial around the Force, and I think a lot of people went into the High Republic thinking, oh, it's just going to be the Jedi, and they're going to be on a high pedestal, and they've got these pirates and marauders, and that's not really. I've heard this a lot from a lot of people. Like, in fact, I was on we got time here, but I was actually in we have like a following, it's called the Fan Force Austin, where just a group of people in Austin, we get together, talk about Star Wars, that kind of thing. It's really, really cool. But today we were talking about, and I just threw the question out there: has anybody read, anything from the High Republic? And a lot of the feedback was, "Nah, it's not really interesting to me." And not that's just one example. I've had other people tell me they're just not interested in Jedi fighting pirates. How is that even a fair battle? How is that even a fair fight? You got to think The only thing, I mean, there are other ways to be intimidating, and certainly we've already seen ways that these guys do it that are really throwing the Jedi off their game. But the fact that this is kind of like an X factor for me. I don't believe that we're not going to get the dark side in some way at some point, and it's all going to stem right here from Marchion Ro. And I think that's really the beginning of what we see in, you know, the Phantom Menace and leading up to the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, I mean, and for a long time we've wanted to see the origin of, maybe not the origin of the Sith necessarily. I mean, clearly we all want to see that, but I think like the rebirth of the dark side, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we had this awakening,
the reemergence,
you know, right? Yeah, we got this awakening with Episode 7, right? But now it's the reawakening of the dark side, and that, you know, that coming about, and maybe I'm with you. I think this is a great opportunity to introduce that, where that's somehow that spark is reignited, and it evolves into what we know today, or what we see going into the prequels, you know, and some of these things originate. I'm not saying we're going to get Palpatine specifically, but, you know, I want to see that this has got to spur something, right? Mm-hmm. Because that is Star Wars. That is this timeline. We're just far enough back from it that we can see these points. I think that we really need to do, though. So I hope that's something that we expand here, because clearly we've got 3 phases of this project, and it's going to go for the next 40 years. So we've got that was embellishing. But,
right, well, we've got a lot of story to tell. Yeah,
right. Yeah, but it was cool that you actually get an idea, though, of how the mind touch works. Ro says that he feels the pressure and the suggestion, and he wants to do what Loden Greatstorm wants to. And of course, he took a lot of amusement at Loden's last name, of course. How fitting, Greatstorm and
right.
and the Storm.
And the Storm, yeah.
Right, but it was cool to have him describe how he wanted to, you know, carry forward with the suggestion, but he wasn't going to. And then Loden Greatstorm actually even force shoves him back to where he hits his head back on the bulkhead, you know, probably knocking his scruples a bit loose. But Loden is just so weak that there's nothing that he can do about it right now. And he warns him, if he ever does that again, he will start killing people.
Yeah. Yeah. Killing the people in the other cells. And right. He could fill that cell up anytime he wants, so he can double up in those cells if he wanted to. So It can make things a lot worse for him.
But then we get an interesting artifact introduced here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one thing that I think a lot of people were talking about, at least in the circles I run around in right afterwards. This is one thing a lot of people were focused on. Mm-hmm. And so it comes about because Loden basically threats him and says, the order is going to come for me. And if they come for me, they're coming for you. And that's when he pulls out this. Basically, it's an iron, like a rod. It's made of metal and stone. It says it's 3 hands long, so I'm figuring it's about 18 inches long. So about that long here. And it's got carved and incised with symbols. The symbols are screaming faces, fires, and chains. So I'm think there's probably something in that. Mm-hmm. It looked like it had been melted down before, so it already melted at one point and it was reforged. So this whatever this thing is, this rod has been through a lot. It has some history tied to it as well. And then when Ro touches it, it suddenly starts glowing purple, and it illuminates all the cells, the area that he's in, with this, he calls it a sickly purple light. And then the last thing was probably the most intriguing thing. It says it was responsible for what happened to his ancestors as the Jedi were. So whatever happened to him and his family, the Jedi were responsible for it as much as this item was responsible for it. And I'm going to go off the deep end here on speculation, but if there's one thing that I think a lot of people have been hung up on when the High Republic was announced, it's that last line when you read about the synopsis or whenever the summary of what the High Republic is. It talks about how there's something that could threaten the Force itself, right? Okay. And I'm starting to wonder if this thing is directly tied to that, and is it so I don't want to get into Test of Courage, but there's a line in Test of Courage where Avon says she wants to construct something someday that'll suppress the Force. And they hint at it, and it feels like it's like a little Easter egg or something that's thrown in there that they're going to build upon a little bit later, because she's trying to she wants to get her hands on a crystal so she can do more experimentation with it. But anyways, it feels like we talked about this, I think, even before when this was first announced, like what would be a threat to the Force itself? And that would be the non-existence of the Force, right? If there's a way in you think about that, if you go back and look at some of the behind the scenes stuff from the writers and the creators of the High Republic, we know there was a couple of things that they marked off from the EU that said that was a really good storyline. That was a really good piece there that we want to incorporate into this. And that takes me to Thrawn, right? And I forget the name of the creatures or whatever were that created those bubbles where the Force didn't operate in, but
Isalamir.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm again, this is all Albert's headcanon, but I'm wondering if something like this, so if it's not directly tied to what happened to his ancestors and what happened to the Jedi, or what the Jedi did to him, it feels like it's connected in some way, if not directly, a result or the reason. But anyway.
Right. And I'm going to kind of avoid comment here because I think we should get through the epilogue to tie all of that kind of together there. But because I think what we get at the very end of the epilogue is very much intertwined with all of this. And
and it's
maybe have a more complete conversation around that. Okay,
let's do that then. Let's get into I forgot that cool slide. All right, let's get into 44, and this is kind of a really quick one. It's everybody gathering at the Starlight Beacon. They're about to celebrate its opening. Bell was the Padawan. Now he's the Padawan of Indira because Loden Greatstorm wasn't there. And, he was supposed to put in a good word for him and be there for that whole ceremony, but he can't. So he's still stuck as a Padawan, unfortunately. And he wants him there.
It sounded like he could progress to the Jedi Knight stage, but yeah, like you were saying, he doesn't want to. It wouldn't feel right without Loden. But we find that Indira believes that Loden is dead. But Bell doesn't want to believe that for whatever reason. I don't know if it's denial or whatnot, but they're kind of assuming that Loden is gone, but he doesn't believe that.
Yeah, and he can't sense him, which you would think would make sense given where he's at, and he's in no space right now. Number one, two, he's surrounded by all that pain and that sort of thing. So it would make sense that they wouldn't be able to detect him.
Right.
Elzar Mann is cleared to take the vows and become a Jedi Master. So because of his efforts with things that he did, whether it was in the last battle here at Kur Nebula, or the fact that he was able to cause that rainstorm to cool down the droids and that droid array, whatever it was, all of these things that had happened, he's now eligible to become a master. So we didn't get to see that ceremony just yet. Every one of the Jedi is here. Again, that's another name drop. They name dropped just about everybody is here at Starlight Beacon. And so kind of gives her final speech. And she ends with, "This station will be the symbol of Republic in the Outer Rim, a place where we will celebrate our union and help each other to make it grow. It will send out a signal for anyone in the sector to hear at any time, the beacon of the Republic, the sound of hope." So we get the shades of hope and from the era of the original trilogy, and we know that's probably it's a really big thing for these people that are out here in the Outer Rim, given that they feel like they're not connected to the core systems and all that. So it's a good send off, and it kind of sets the stage. The Starlight Beacon's in full operation at this point, and this kind of leads us into what we're starting to see now more in the comics, and then with the novels that are coming up, this will kind of be the basis and where we start from.
Right.
All right, and let's get to what you want to talk about, Epilogue. And there's some interesting things here. So this starts with Elzar Mann, Avar Kriss. They're on the Starlight Beacon. They're kind of in a section where they're growing, like, a special kind of, it's a very surreal or serene setting.
Right.
They almost describe it like this little mini paradise kind of thing. And of course,
like of a botanical garden of sorts. Is
there you go. Yeah. We get more of them feeling more than just, hey, we're buddies. And on both sides, like we get Avar Kriss, there's a comment about how she feels really connected to him. And, he kind of reciprocates that as well. But this is where she says, "I've now been put in charge of the Starlight Beacon." And his first thought is, well, how am I going to see you? I'm not going to see you again. Like, I'm not going to see you as much if you're going to be here and I'm going to be out, somewhere. She's basically landlocked in terms of, how he's looking at this.
Right.
And he kind of makes peace with that by knowing that she's still going to be doing what she does and pulling everybody together when they need to. So she'll always be in the back of his mind, but he's feeling a loss here by the fact that he's now going to be separated from her. And this is something they've never been separated ever since they were Padawan. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, you definitely feel that connection, and they share this moment where they're touching hands and whatnot. But that they both also understand that this is the things that they explored or whatever it was when they were Padawans. Some of those feelings, when they went through the progressions of the Jedi path, they've already had to make those sacrifices. And when we start to sense that, and we while there's a sense of loss, they both seem like they are okay with it. Although at the very end, we kind of get this, we can always write to each other kind of thing, like a
Right.
long distance pen pals in Star Wars is kind of the type of thing that we got. But it still was very good though. And I think some of Elzar Mann's comments were really interesting too. He's going to be doing a lot of research. He already has a bunch of ideas with what they did with the droids and the storms about other applications of the Force. So he's really interested in getting that master title, so then he can go and progress his own research into doing other things with the Force and really showing. But there was a little bit of a boastfulness there too of really show the council what we can do with the Force, which again is still just a little bit of hint of that pride in Elzar Mann that we might have to explore.
Yeah. We there's also a moment there where they're holding hands, like they purposely go and hold each other's hands, and then they kind of let go, realizing, okay, that we can't do this kind of thing. So it's just confirmation that that we've known all along that there's definitely more than just friendship here at play. They do have feelings for each other, but it's a forbidden. I guess it's a forbidden relationship. It's a forbidden attachment. I won't say it's a forbidden love, because we've got plenty of Jedi that have been in love before,
right? But
the attachment piece of it certainly is. Okay, and so finally, Chris heads off. She leaves. She's going to go, partake in the festivities that are going on with the opening of the Starlight Beacon. He sticks around behind, and he's kind of just drifting off in kind of thinking about, I don't know, whatever. And suddenly he has, I guess we're going to call it a Force vision.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a prophecy, and we did a whole show on the difference and all that, of what these are. But it's certainly a Force vision that comes to him. And it starts with, like you said, there's a sickly purple light. Okay, so that draws us directly to this object, this rod that Marchion Ro has. So we know that it's going to play a part in this. It says, Jedi, many he knew, friends and colleagues, horribly mutilated, fighting battles they could not win against awful things that lived in the dark, things that lived in the deep. I think that is the plant guys, right?
Dragir.
Yeah. That's pretty clear now, right? Wasn't maybe as clear when this book came out, but here we are 2 months later, and we all kind of know that's the case.
Right.
The Jedi, those who survive, were fleeing, not retreating, but fleeing. So this all plays into the aspect of fear, right? That and at the end, this whole thing ends with the greatest enemy of all, fear, right? So that's the fear of the Jedi. The Jedi are going to get to a point where they are actually scared and almost, and I would say literally, they're running away from this thing, whatever it is that's surfaced here, which I think is pretty powerful, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and they've teased this for a while, that the Drengir are something really special and unique that they have not experienced before, that they don't know how to fight, and they are an unstoppable type of force. And we've speculated whether or not there was some alignment with them and the Nile at some point, which seems interesting of how that might happen, because while they're sentient, they don't seem to be all that talkative. I mean, they're just plants, right? But anyway, so it's kind of an interesting thing, though, that we know that's coming, but how does that overlap with the Nile, and how does that and he's overwhelmed by these screams and the agony and the pain. He's actually got blood coming out of his nose, and he ends up spitting blood at the very end. And and when, like we've talked about this before, we know the one thing that the Jedi really cannot endure is extended periods of fear. And especially if you've got the entire order succumbing to something like that, that could be very dangerous, because that's how the darkness comes back, right? That's how the darkness seeps in. You start being afraid of what you're going to lose. And then if you're just afraid for your life in general, that's what Bell, Zettifar had to get over. That was his test. That was his trial, right? Of knowing that the true path of the Jedi is to not look inward, but to express yourself outward and look at other people and protect the life that's around you, and sacrificing your own for that common good. But whenever you start retreating, then you start becoming more self-centered, and darkness awaits in every way you want to interpret that comment.
Right. There's to be clear, like this, it starts off as a vision, I think, and then it clearly states that it almost turns into a prophecy. Like, right. It is a foregone, like in his mind, at least, it goes from vision to a prophecy. And when it goes into a prophecy, that's when he realizes that this was he said it feels like an unknowable, avoidable vision of the future. This felt inevitable, certain, right? The horror sweeping across the galaxy like a tide. He saw Jedi screaming, saw himself with no escape, slowly agonizing. All this stuff was happening. And this again, it wasn't all with everything that he was seeing, all these visions and everything. The one thing that really struck him hard was what you said, like it was the fear itself. Mm-hmm. And you can't help but think of what Yoda said, right? About fear leading to anger, anger leading to hate, hate leading to suffering. And I think that they're clearly mapping this out, that once this fear comes in, this is what I think they're going to go, the galaxy or the Jedi, at least at a minimum, are going to go through all of this. I think they're going to go through fear. They're going to go through the anger. They're going to go through hatred, and all of that is going to lead to suffering, which eventually will be the fall, which will lead to the fall of the Jedi Order. And then at that point, I would imagine the dark side already is here, right? It's now resurfaced. If not, it is about to put the final pieces together to give way or give birth, if you will, to somebody like a Palpatine or, whoever, whoever that may be. Plagueis.
Yeah. You know? I mean, that's where that's the path we got to go down. What'll be interesting though is reconciling where the High Republic goes, because when we get to the original trilogy with Kenobi, and he's describing this to Luke of, for the 1,000 generations, the Jedi were around to protect. So, I mean, we can't really go through an entire extinction of the Jedi yet, right? I mean, the numbers still have to be there, but and we've speculated about this, what were the true numbers of the Jedi in the prequel trilogy? Mm-hmm. It seemed like they were very numerous, but I think we were in the few hundreds by that point or something like that. I don't know. And we've been led to believe back in the Old Republic and things like that, we've had thousands of Jedi or something like that. And High Republic, I don't know if we've got a good ballpark idea for how many we have, but clearly they are numerous, because this is a high time for the entire galaxy. But so it'd be interesting how that, if there's a bit of a culling here and just how dramatic that looks like, and then how does that tie into some of the other content that we've grown up with?
Yeah, and I would say, I don't want people to think or come across, or I don't want to give the idea or the message, at least from me, that I think the Jedi are going to fall. I don't mean that in a literal sense, because we know that they don't. What does happen to them is they become very arrogant, right? They let their guard down and they think, and I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to get to a point where they're up against, this great fear and things are really falling apart, and they persevere and they come out on top. And the way that they do and the manner in which they do puts them in a position to feel like we're done, like mission accomplished again. Like we have nothing to worry about at this point. And that's what happens, right? I mean, that's where they pick up at. They're feeling pretty arrogant. They've extinguished whatever this is or whatever just came to be. And that's what kind of gave the fertile breeding ground for somebody like a Palpatine to rise, to the dark side to rise, or kind of just be there without them really knowing. So I don't think they're going to fall completely by any means, but they are going to get to a point where they're going to feel very exposed, or whether or not they realize that they're going to be exposed. And certainly, an easy target for somebody like the dark side to come in.
Right. And I remember I was reading the flapjacket of Victory's Price, the third book in the Alphabet Squadron book that's coming out soon. And one of the things it talks about is, to achieve victory, there's always a price. And so what is that cost of victory? And so by the time we get through the end of all of this, what's that price that the Jedi have to pay? And then to your point, there has to be seeds of what we see later on in those moments. And so I think it's very much this is the path we're going to go down. We'll have to see what tactics they decide to employ and just what that does to them psychologically, spiritually, and just their belief system. And we know this is going to have to take a certain direction, even if it's victorious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good stuff. I would ask for your thoughts on the book, but I mean, we're kind of over on time, and there's probably a lot to talk about. But overall,
I thought it was solid. It was not. I like that it was a pretty tight story. It moved really fast. I think overall, by the time we got to this last third of the book, I know I've read some feedback. I think we got some feedback on YouTube on one of our earlier High Republic shows where some people are having a really hard time getting through it. Maybe they're not getting through they read up to the first third and it's just they're not engaged or whatnot. But I would encourage those people to go through and read the rest of the book. Give the whole book your time. And because I think when you get to this last third, it does pick up and get interesting enough. And it does have some excitement. And you do start to see these things start to play out and progress the characters. And it's not that this book was slow. It was just kind of, it's ramping up a little bit, and it's taking you on that journey. And having to set a lot of things in place without putting them right in front of you. But overall, I liked it. I think it's a good start to the High Republic in general. Gives us a very good overview where we're at. We've got good perspectives on several of the main characters. We already care about some of them quite a bit. I mean, you're a huge Avar Kriss fan, and we know that was our man. We haven't even touched on Stellan Gios yet. To understand what he's going to look like, but we know he's the third person in this triumvirate. So, but yeah, so I think overall we're off to a good start. We have to see if they can keep that momentum up and what all the other content looks like. So what about you?
Yeah, I was all in when this thing started, and coming from the idea that, again, it was not tied, and I've said this many times, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, so bear with me if you've already heard this, but I just really like this idea that they were not going to be tied to the all the stuff that's going to happen either in the prequel trilogy or anything thereafter, right?
Right.
That was true of this book, and it's been true of all the other books, and it's been true of the comics. So that in itself was refreshing to me, because I've always felt like, as much as I love the EU, there were certain stories I didn't really care for. Some were great, but at the end of the day, they had a lot. What made them really cool was that they were able to kind of just do whatever they wanted to, because it really, wasn't canon, right? It wasn't that level, and they had a lot of wiggle room there. When we got to the Disney era, things were a little bit more constrained, and I get it. That's necessarily feedback, but you can't go and start telling these stories you want to tell, because you had to allow for the other storytellers that were going to come after you, and you had to be mindful of what came before you, right? So so these writers were coming in, and it felt like they were very constrained at times. There was only so much they could do. There was only so much they could do to characters, and there were only so many risks or types of risks that they could take. Right. We don't get any of that with the High Republic, which is great. It's very liberating. There's a lot of freedom there with regards to storytelling. And for me, as somebody that, and as you, right, we love to speculate. We love to talk about what could happen, this and that. Well, we've got like your mind's going crazy right now with all these ideas. And because, again, I don't have anything holding me back there. It could be anything really. And so I think there's something really exciting about that. Now, the merits of the book itself, I feel like I think the book was great. I really enjoyed it. I think this is my third read through this one. I've read Tests of Courage twice. That's a really quick read. And I think I'm in my second reading of Into the Darkness, because we've got that one coming up here soon. So it is, I find myself going back to the books and reading. I've had a chance to, as I've done it, there's new things that come up. Now, of course, we've dissected this book to no end. So if we left something out, pardon us. But there's a lot of stuff in here that I think that you really can parse out and really kind of sink your teeth into, which I think is kind of fun. All of them have so far been pretty quick reads. The comics are the same way. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend it. To your point, stick with the book. Get through try to read through, at least get to the halfway mark. If you can get that to that point, the last half of the book is pretty much smooth sailing. And I think there's a lot there. And these last 4 chapters really give you a lot of information. There's a lot of stuff they just kind of, start planting seeds for, that I think are going to start sprouting into a lot of these different spin-off books and stuff over the course of the next 3 years that we have content coming out, which is just crazy. So, I mean, we're just at the very tip of the storytelling with the High Republic, which is really exciting, given all that. Yeah,
it really is. And again, we'll have to see what these next books look like. One of the more critical aspects of the EU is that there was a lot of filler. I mean, like you said, there were a lot of great stories with a ton of great characters, but there was a lot of filler. Mm-hmm. And the filler didn't always amount to really anything. And we don't like that about Star Wars. Now, we don't exactly have a series that we're developing here, even though this is a total project with an overall plan. It's not like in the order, you have to read all these books in these order in order to understand the storyline. And so it's going to be very interesting how they continue to mesh these together, and how important it will be to absorb the other forms of content that they have, like you said, with the children's type of books, or the young adult, or comic books, or the adult novels. And so we've got all these different sources now. How integrated do people have to be in order to really feel invested in that story and in some of these characters, where, like we said, they mention them in one source material, but they're really expounded upon it somewhere else. So, yeah, because that will frustrate people. If all of a sudden you got someone that you're not as familiar with, and you can frustrate both sides. you're like, well, now we have to take time to reintroduce this character, or who is this character and why are they so important all of a sudden?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's a difficult balance that they would need to strike, but I mean, there's ways they can do it, but we'll just have to see what this looks like when, we get to the end of this year and say, okay, here's our scope of content. And maybe at the end of the year, we just, okay, what's the state, what's the state of the High Republic 1 year in, after, when we get to January, what do we think? Where are we at? And where have we come from, and where are we going to now? And then what does the outlook of this look like? And what does the future of Star Wars really look like for the next couple of years after that?
Yeah. And luckily, good or bad, they've got it mapped out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that for me is another piece of this that just feels like, okay, good. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to feel like I went into the sequel trilogy. I feel like this is at least laid out. I may not like the story. I may not like where it goes at points in different times, but I know they put a lot of time and thought. And you can tell, like, if you go through and read all of the materials, the books, the young adult novels, the comics, man, there are so many things. It is well mapped out, and they call back to it, and there's not a lot of error, right? There's not a lot of contradictions and stuff like that. You can definitely see the bigger story here, which is really cool. I love the fact that they've gone to that extent on this one. So,
yep.
All right, well, that'll do it for us for this episode. I do want to make mention again that we've got the question and answer episode coming up. So we need questions in by March 20th. And again, you'll see this on Facebook and everything else that we do to advertise that. But we need your questions for that. That'll air on the I don't even know where that was now. The 25th, I think March 25th. So We'll record that one. And then we've got another From a Certain Point of View coming out as well. So that'll be towards the end of the month. Again with Dante. So, and then we've got more people lined up for that. So get your questions in as soon as you can, so that we can get those on the board, get some answers for you that you'll hate and love. And anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah. So cantinacastfanmail@gmail.com, Discord, eargluemedia.com/Discord. And then all the social medias, just search at the Cantina Cast or at Cantina Cast and you'll find us. So all the different ways you can get questions to us. We do check YouTube comments as well. So whatever you feel most comfortable, but if you want to talk to us a little bit, we'd love to see you over in Discord as well. A lot of great conversation going on there, especially around WandaVision and stuff lately. So if you're a fan of Marvel and you feel like you're an expert in Marvel, please come help us. That some of us who are not, but are really interested in what's going on over there. So, but a lot of great conversation across all the different shows right now.
Yes. Good plug for Discord. Okay, with that, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully you got a lot of great stuff from our extensive 14-hour coverage of Light of the Jedi. We'll be back for the next show, which is the Q&A.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.